I'm 74 years old, and most of my life is already gone. Not because of an accident, not because of some tragedy that swept through my family like wildfire, but because I waited. I waited for the right moment. I waited for stability. I waited for permission. I waited for someday, and someday is the only day that never comes. My name is Margaret Helen, though most people who've known me over the decades just called me Maggie, and I'm about to spend the next hour telling you something I wish someone had told me when I was your age, whenever that is. I wish someone had sat me down and said, Maggie, there's a thief in your house, and you're letting him live rent-free. That thief doesn't break windows or kick down doors. He doesn't announce himself or send a warning. He moves slowly, so slowly you don't notice he's stealing everything.
He steals your time.
He steals your potential. He steals the version of yourself you could have been. And by the time you realize what's happening, by the time you finally turn around to face him, decades have already vanished. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter. Please subscribe to Olive Stories, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now, let's continue. Where did the time actually go? Why didn't anyone warn us? When does later quietly become never? These questions have haunted me for the last 2 years, ever since I woke up in a hospital room with oxygen tubes in my nose and a cardiologist telling me I should have had this conversation about my heart health 30 years ago. But they say hindsight is 20/20ths, and they're right, but they don't tell you that hindsight is also brutal. They don't tell you that clarity, when it finally arrives, comes with a kind of grief you didn't know existed. The grief of watching your own life like you're watching a movie you've already seen, knowing every moment before it happens, unable to change a single frame. My father, Douglas Henry Morrison, was a corporate accountant in Portland, Oregon. He was the kind of man who believed that the world worked in ordered rows and columns, that if you followed the formula long enough, security would eventually arrive like clockwork. My mother, Eleanor Ruth, was a schoolteacher who spent her days molding young minds and her evenings preparing lesson plans that she never once complained about. They were good people. They were responsible people. They were the kind of people who got what they deserved, or so we all thought. They had a modest house on Morrison Street, which my father found amusing in a quiet way. They had my older brother, David, and then they had me. I was born in 1950, and I spent my childhood in a world that still believed in the future. Everyone around me talked about the future like it was a guarantee, like you just needed to work hard enough, be good enough, follow the rules carefully enough, and the future would deliver everything you'd earned. I was a good student. I got straight A's not because I was particularly brilliant, but because I understood the assignment early. Do what you're supposed to do, and life rewards you. I had decent friends. I went to school dances. I had my first kiss behind the gymnasium in 1966 with a boy named Thomas who tasted like double-mint gum and disappointment, though I didn't realize the disappointment part until years later. In high school, I was told repeatedly that I should go to college, and back then, for a girl, that was already unusual. My guidance counselor, Mr. Prescott, said I had a sharp mind for literature, that I could be a teacher or a librarian or maybe even a journalist if I was willing to work hard enough. But here's what nobody told me. Knowing your potential and actualizing your potential are separated by an ocean of fear that nobody talks about. I went to the University of Washington. I studied English literature because it was what I loved, but I also studied education because it was practical. I learned to code switch between my dreams and my responsibilities before I even knew that was a real thing. During my second year of college, I met Richard. Richard Garrison was a business major with dark eyes and a confident smile that made you believe in things, at least for a while. He was 2 years ahead of me, and he represented everything I'd been taught to want: ambition, stability, a clear path to a comfortable life. We dated for 8 months before he asked me to marry him. There was no elaborate proposal, no bended knee or ring hidden in dessert. He asked me on a Tuesday afternoon while we were walking across the quad, and he said, "We make sense, don't we?" That was the extent of my proposal. We make sense. And I said yes because 20 years old, the things you're supposed to do still feel like the things you want to do. We got married in 1970, and I never finished my degree. I'd completed 2.5 years, and I was only 1 year away from my bachelor's, but Richard got a job offer at a bank in Seattle, a really good job, the kind of opportunity you're supposed to take, and I followed. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd go back to school after Richard got settled, after we bought a house, after we had children. But there's something about the word after that makes you believe in a specific timeline, and timelines are lies we tell ourselves. We never went back. We never went back because my son, Mark Richard, was born in 1972, and then my daughter, Catherine Louise, was born in 1974, and suddenly I was a mother, and motherhood is a kind of beautiful trap, the kind of trap nobody warns you about because society has decided that the trap is actually a prize. I loved my children. This is important to understand. I wasn't some woman who resented her role or felt trapped by her choices. I genuinely loved waking up with them, teaching them to read, watching them grow. But love and regret aren't opposites. You can feel both at exactly the same time. At 42, I said something I'd regret for the rest of my life. It was 1992. Mark was in college, Catherine was in high school, and Richard had just been promoted to vice president at his bank. We were celebrating at our kitchen table, and I was genuinely happy for him. But I was also teaching part-time at the community college, finally doing something close to what I'd once loved, and I was thinking about going back to finish my undergraduate degree. I mentioned it casually, almost as a joke. I said, maybe in a couple of years, I'll finally finish what I started. And Richard looked at me with this expression I'd seen 1,000 times before, a look that combined patience with practical concern, and he said, Maggie, when are you going to grow up and stop chasing fantasies? Those words landed somewhere deep inside my chest, and they stayed there for decades. I didn't respond. I didn't cry. I smiled and changed the subject and made a mental note that maybe he was right. Maybe wanting things was a luxury that people in my position couldn't afford. Maybe dreams were for people who didn't have real responsibilities. The most dangerous lie that we tell ourselves is that there will be time for everything we want later. Later becomes the great postponement. Later becomes the prayer we repeat every night. Later is where all the dreams go to die quietly, without fanfare. Because later feels so real, doesn't it? Later feels like a concrete thing you can point to. Later feels like you're making a responsible choice, like you're being mature and realistic and practical. But later is the most dangerous word in the English language, and I didn't understand that until I'd already given it decades. We had a house. We had income. We had what everyone told us to want. Richard was successful in his career, and I was successful in supporting his success, which they told us was the same thing. I volunteered at school events. I joined the PTA and then the City Council's Community Liaison Board. I became a reliable person, the kind of woman other women called when they needed someone to step up, to organize, to make things happen. And I did. I made things happen. But I never made the things I actually wanted happen. I was so busy being responsible that I forgot to be alive. At 50, my father died. He was 78, and he had a massive heart attack while reading the newspaper in his favorite chair. They said it was quick, that he probably didn't suffer much. I remember thinking at his funeral that he looked like he was finally resting. He'd worked at the same firm for 42 years. He'd never taken an extended vacation. He'd never written the book he always said he might write someday. He'd lived his entire life believing that the reward would come at the end, and then the end came, and there he was, still waiting. I don't think I made the connection consciously at that moment. I was too busy grieving, too busy being the dutiful daughter, helping my mother, too busy maintaining the performance of a well-adjusted woman whose life was going exactly according to plan. But somewhere in my subconscious, a bell was ringing. Once things settle down, I'll live. Once Richard's settled in this new position, I'll take that writing class. Once the kids are out of the house, I'll volunteer for that international development program. Once we pay off the house, I'll travel. Once I lose these 20 pounds, I'll buy those clothes I've been looking at. Once things settle down, once the stars align, once the universe conspires to hand me a moment of free time, then I'll actually live. But the universe is very quiet about her schedule, and she's not taking requests. The best part about that lie is that it sounds so reasonable. It sounds responsible. It sounds like the kind of thing a grown woman would think. And it's perfect because there's always something to settle down. There's always another obstacle. There's always a new reason to wait. When Mark graduated college and struggled to find a good job, I postponed my plans. When Catherine got divorced at 28, I was there every morning, helping her rebuild. When Richard's company went through a restructure, I made sure our household ran smoothly. I was 60 years old before I realized I'd been waiting for stability that never quite arrived. That stability was a moving target I'd been chasing for decades. By then, I'd missed so much. I missed the writer's residency I turned down because Richard had a work conference. I missed watching my best friend, Patricia, dance in that community theater production because I was making dinner for Richard's boss. I missed saying yes to a girls' trip to New Orleans because we were in a saving phase and I didn't want to be frivolous. I miss being the person I could have been, and I watched that version of Maggie fade away like an old photograph left too long in the sun. And then my body forced a decision I hadn't made. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of realizing I never really lived. That's what the cardiologist told me when I woke up in the hospital. He didn't tell me in those exact words, of course. He used medical jargon and pointed at charts and explained that the stress on my heart had been accumulating for years, that I had a dangerous blockage that could have killed me decades ago, that I was very lucky. But lucky, I learned, is a relative term. Lucky is watching your own life flash before your eyes and realizing it wasn't the life you actually wanted. Lucky is getting a second chance and understanding that you've already wasted the first one. My marriage was already ending by the time I had the heart attack. I don't think the heart attack caused the unraveling so much as it exposed what had already been breaking. Richard and I had become expert at being in the same room while living in separate worlds. He had his golf club and his professional networks and his careful, ordered existence. I had my community work and my part-time teaching, and somewhere along the way, we'd forgotten why we'd married each other in the first place. We'd married because we made sense, and maybe that had never been enough. After the hospitalization, after the medications and the lifestyle changes and the stern warnings, something shifted in me. It was like I'd been looking at my life through frosted glass, and suddenly someone wiped it clean. I could see clearly. And the clarity was devastating. I could see all the years I'd spent waiting. I could see the moments I'd said no when I wanted to say yes. I could see my father in that chair, and I could see myself following him, and I could feel the weight of time like a physical thing pressing down on my chest. I talked to Richard about separating in the spring of 1998. We did it quietly, without drama.
We divided our assets fairly.
We remained cordial. To everyone else, it looked like a reasonable dissolution of a marriage that had simply run its course. Nobody knew that inside, I was dying and being reborn at the same time. I was 48 years old when we separated, and I had maybe 30 or 40 good years left, maybe less. The math was suddenly very real. I got my own apartment in Seattle, a small one-bedroom with a window that looked out onto the Puget Sound. I'd never had a space that was entirely my own, not since I was a teenager. I painted the walls a warm mustard yellow. I bought plants. I put books on the shelves without checking with anyone about whether it was practical. And then I did something radical. I applied to the University of Washington to finish my degree. I was 48 years old, and I walked into the registrar's office and said, "I'd like to complete my bachelor's degree." The woman behind the desk didn't blink. She didn't tell me I was too old or that it was impractical or that I should be thinking about retirement instead. She just processed my paperwork and said, "Welcome back." I finished my degree in English literature in 2000. I was 50 years old, and I walked across the graduation stage and collected a diploma for work I'd done half my lifetime ago. Mark and Catherine both came to the ceremony. Richard didn't. But I barely noticed his absence because I was too busy feeling something I hadn't felt in decades. I was proud of myself. Not proud in the quiet, dutiful way that comes from doing what you're supposed to do. Proud in the fierce, stubborn way that comes from finally choosing yourself. After I graduated, I started writing. Not for money, because I knew the odds were terrible. Not to become famous, because by that point I understood that fame is just another version of waiting for external validation. I wrote because I finally could. I wrote about my life. I wrote about the choices I didn't make. I wrote about time and regret and the beautiful, terrible mistake of postponing joy. I wrote short stories that nobody would ever read and essays that nobody would ever publish, and it didn't matter. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't doing something to build someone else's dream. I was doing something for myself. Around this same time, I became friends with a woman named Susan. Susan was a librarian, and we met at a community event where I was volunteering. She was 52, divorced, and unapologetically living her own life. She was also afraid of flying, which is relevant because in 2002, she decided to finally take a trip she'd been planning for 15 years. She was going to Costa Rica. She invited me to come with her. The practical part of my brain, the part that had learned to say no, to wait, to be responsible, immediately started constructing reasons I couldn't go. I didn't have the money. My teaching position was seasonal. It wasn't the right time. But I'd spent half my life listening to that voice, and I'd learned what it sounded like to hear decades compressed into silence. So I said yes. I went to Costa Rica. I was 52 years old, and I'd barely left the Pacific Northwest. I was terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. I saw the rainforests. I saw the Caribbean Sea. I saw butterflies the size of birds. I saw myself as a person who could do things, who could choose things, who could say yes to adventure. And I came home, and I quit my secure part-time teaching position, and I got a job at an independent bookstore instead because it paid less but allowed me to work part-time and travel and have flexibility. People thought I was crazy. Certain members of my family thought I was having a breakdown. They used the word irresponsible, and maybe it was. But for the first time, the irresponsibility felt like freedom. In the years that followed, I traveled. Not extensively, not lavishly, but deliberately. I went to Portland to visit museums. I took a train to San Francisco. I went back to Costa Rica with Susan, and then with another friend named Jennifer. I started a book club. I dated a man named Robert, who taught history, and made me laugh in a way Richard never had. The relationship didn't last, but the person I became during that relationship did. I was becoming the woman I might have been if I hadn't married so young and spent so many decades performing someone else's life. I was becoming myself. The years between 50 and 60 were the best years of my life, and I'll say that knowing that I only have a few years left and I still wouldn't trade them for anything. Not for security. Not for stability. Not for someone else's approval. At 60, I retired from the bookstore. I didn't have a lot of money. My pension was modest. Richard had been generous in our divorce settlement, which helped. I had Social Security to look forward to, but I finally understood something crucial. I didn't need a lot of money to live. I needed freedom. I needed time. And time, when you finally have it, is worth more than anything else in the world. I spent my 60s traveling more seriously. I went to Europe for the first time. I went to Greece. I went to Turkey. I saw the world, and the world changed me. I met people. I had conversations that taught me things. I learned that regret doesn't scream. Regret whispers at night. It comes when you're alone and quiet, and it reminds you of all the moments you chose safety instead of joy, comfort instead of growth, approval instead of authenticity. I learned that time is the only currency that actually matters, because everything else is just time converted into different forms. Money is time. Status is time. Security is time in the bank, and the interest rate is terrible. And I learned something harder. I learned that some of the years I spent waiting weren't just lost. They were stolen from me by people who knew me, people I loved, people who benefited from my sacrifice. Richard didn't force me to stay in that marriage. He just lived his life, and I organized myself around his life, and we both pretended that was love. My mother didn't force me to postpone my education. She just expressed disappointment when I mentioned it, and I internalized that disappointment as a reason to give up. Nobody held a gun to my head, but they all participated in a culture that taught me that my desires didn't matter as much as my usefulness. At 70, I started this channel. I started Olive Stories because I wanted to talk to women like me. Women who are in their 50s and 60s and realizing, sometimes for the first time, that they've been living for everyone else. Women who are still waiting for permission to live their own lives. Women who haven't yet understood that waiting for the right time is the same as choosing the wrong life. I started telling stories because stories have power. Stories can reach people that lectures can't. Stories can say, "Here's what happened to me, and I hope you learn from it before it's too late for you." I've been dying slowly this whole time, since the heart attack, since the diagnosis of heart disease that comes from decades of stress and suppression and swallowing my own needs. The doctors don't talk about it that way. They talk about medication and exercise and dietary changes. But the truth is, my heart has been breaking for 50 years, and the physical disease is just the visible manifestation of that breaking. But dying has been a gift too. It's given me clarity. It's given me urgency. It's made me speak my truth without filtering it through what people might think or feel. It's made me stop pretending that security is worth buying with your soul. In the past 2 years, I've traveled more than I did in the 15 years before. I've written essays that nobody reads and poetry that nobody publishes and stories that might help one person understand that it's not too late, that it's never too late until you die, that every moment still remaining is a moment you can choose differently. I have a list now. I have a bucket list, though I hate that term because it sounds so trite. But I have a list of things I want to do, places I want to see, experiences I want to have. Some of them will probably get crossed off. Some of them probably won't because time is running out, and I'm not denying that anymore. But the list itself is powerful. The list itself is a protest against the decades I wasted waiting. Last month, I went swimming in the Pacific Ocean, even though I have a heart condition and my cardiologist would probably prefer I didn't. I went at sunset, and I floated in the cold water, and I felt alive in a way I hadn't felt since I was maybe 20 years old. I thought about my father in that chair. I thought about Richard's question about when I was going to grow up and stop chasing fantasies. I thought about all the birthday cakes I'd baked for other people without acknowledging my own desires. I thought about the woman I could have been. And then I realized that I was still becoming that woman, that it wasn't too late, that the last chapter of my life didn't have to read like a regret. Here's what I wish I'd known when I was your age, whenever that is. I wish I'd known that someday never comes, but today always does. I wish I'd known that other people's comfort with your choices matters a lot less than your own peace with your life. I wish I'd known that settling down and growing up were not the same thing, and choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. I wish I'd known that the life you're supposed to live and the life you actually want to live are often in direct conflict, and you have to be willing to disappoint people, to break expectations, to be difficult, in order to have any chance of authenticity. The most dangerous years of your life aren't when you're young. They're the years when nothing seems wrong, when you're safe and secure and the trap is so comfortable that you forget it's a trap at all. That's when the thief steals. That's when the years evaporate like morning fog. That's when later becomes never without you even noticing. I'm 74 years old. I don't know how much time I have left. The doctors don't give specifics, which is probably kind of them. Could be 5 years.
Could be 15.
Could be I'll keel over tomorrow. The uncertainty doesn't terrify me anymore the way it used to. It clarifies me. Every moment still remaining is a moment I can spend deliberately. Every conversation is a chance to speak truth. Every day is a chance to become more myself, not less. If you're younger than 40, I'm begging you, don't wait. Don't tell yourself that you'll live when the conditions are right, because the conditions will never be right. There will always be another reason to postpone. Don't tell yourself you'll travel when you have more money. Don't tell yourself you'll pursue your passion when you have more time. Don't tell yourself you'll reconcile with people you've damaged relationships with when you feel more stable. Don't tell yourself any version of the lie I told myself for 50 years. If you're between 40 and 60, you're in the danger zone. This is when the postponement becomes a habit so deep that you forget you're even doing it. You're secure enough that nothing seems urgent. You're busy enough that you have legitimate reasons to wait. You're trapped enough that escape feels impossible. But it's not. It's never impossible. You just have to be willing to blow it all up. If you're over 60, it's almost certainly too late for some things.
I'll be honest about that.
I won't be a prima ballerina. I won't climb Kilimanjaro. I won't have a career as a published author in the traditional sense. But it's not too late for other things. It's not too late to be kind. It's not too late to tell people you love them. It's not too late to forgive. It's not too late to try. It's not too late to become more fully yourself. It's never too late for that. Time gets faster. After you turn 40, the years just accelerate. A year feels like a season. A season feels like a week. A week feels like a breath. And suddenly you're 74, and your life is almost over, and you're making peace with the fact that you lived for everyone else first and yourself last, and there was never a middle ground, never a balance, never a moment where you could have it both ways. But maybe you can do it differently. Maybe you can be the kind of person who says yes to things. Maybe you can be the kind of person who disappoints others while staying true to yourself. Maybe you can be the kind of person who lives deliberately, knowing that time is running out, and that understanding makes every moment matter. That's what I've tried to do. That's what I'm trying to do right now, in this moment, speaking directly to you, hoping that maybe one of these words lands in the right place at the right time and saves you 50 years of regret. I'm not asking you to live like me. I'm not asking you to travel the world or divorce your husband or quit your job or paint your walls mustard yellow. I'm asking you to examine your own life and ask yourself, honestly, with no audience and no performance, is this the life I chose? Or is this the life I accepted? Is this what I want? Or is this what I settled for? And if it's the latter, what am I willing to do about it? Because that answer, whatever it is, will determine everything that comes next. Thank you for listening. Subscribe to Olive Stories. There are more stories coming, stories of women who waited and stories of women who didn't, stories that might help you understand that you still have time, that there's still time, that time is the only thing that matters. Comment below. Tell me your story. Tell me what you're waiting for and what you might do about it. Tell me if this landed for you. Tell me if I'm wrong. And then close this video and go do one thing. Just one thing. One thing you've been postponing. One thing you've been waiting to do. Make the call. Buy the ticket. Write the first sentence. Sign up for the class. Say the words you've been holding back. Tell the truth. Do one thing today that your 74-year-old self will thank you for doing. Because time is running out for all of us, and the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is right now.